Good morning. So my name is Omar. I'm a final year medical student at King's College London. I'm just about now graduating as well. And so today I'll be going through the topic of respiration. But before we continue, I think it's incredibly important that we know what your understanding is. So ideally what I want to know is, what do you understand about respiration? And then also I'd like you to tell me, have you come across this topic before? Have you had any difficulties with this in the past? Okay, perfect. Excellent. So let's get cracking. So these are the learning objectives. I think these are incredibly important. Let's go through them because these will basically solidify exactly what we're going to cover. They're like a skeleton for it. And then if there's anything extra that you need, we can go through that as well, okay? So ideally what we want to do is we want to understand that, sometimes we think respiration is us breathing in and out. It's what I used to think when I used to do GCSE biology, but in fact, it's actually a chemical process and it occurs in most and nearly all of your cells, and it occurs all the time. And it's got a very important function as well. So we will go through this as we go through the slides, okay? It's very important we also know that what type of chemical reaction it is. And so with the respiration, it's basically an exothermic reaction, and we'll go through that too. And then one key point that we've got to take from today's session is we have to be able to differentiate between what is aerobic and what is anaerobic respiration, okay? So I just want to highlight those two words. So we've got aerobic respiration and anaerobic respirations. So we'll go through what those two are, what the main differences are, and then we'll also talk about, for example, what the chemical reaction involves, what the products are, and how sometimes we can use it to make, we use it in the industry, for example, we can use it to make bread, etc., and alcohol. So we'll go through all those too, okay? So the most important thing is that we sort of have a quick recap. So exothermic, can you tell me what you understand about this? Okay, so as you probably know, exothermic, you're probably thinking, oh, we learned this in chemistry, but actually it's very relevant to biology as well. And so respiration is pretty much like combustion. And so what you've got is you've got your products, and that, for example, this can be fuel and oxygen, and then what this results in is energy. And energy is exactly what we want from respiration, okay? The important thing to know about exothermic chemical reactions is that they basically use energy to release the heat. So they actually produce a lot of heat. Perfect. So just to quickly summarize, we've said that respiration is an exothermic reaction. It uses products. It releases heat, so the temperature will increase, okay? So does that make sense so far? Could you repeat to me what I've said? Excellent, okay. And why do you think we need energy? Absolutely. So we need it for muscle contraction, which, as you know, is needed for movement, for survival. We need energy so that we can produce protein, so that we can grow. And most importantly is that, as humans, we need to keep warm so that we can have an adequate body temperature, okay? So those are the reasons why respiration is incredibly important. Perfect, let's move on. Okay, so with aerobic respiration, it occurs in all living cells, and it occurs in plants and animals. And before we continue, can you tell me, what you know about aerobic respiration? Tell me anything that you know. Perfect. Okay. Absolutely correct. So it uses glucose, it uses oxygen, and then the byproducts are carbon dioxide and water. So this is something that we need to commit to memory, because sometimes in your exams they will ask you to complete the equation basically as well. And we also need to know the skeletal formula, which is C6H12O6, which is basically how we would write glucose, okay? And you get 6 oxygen molecules, and then in the end you get 6 CO2 and 6 H2O, okay? And this is basically a balanced equation. And this is something that we will have to commit to memory, so make sure you write this down, okay? Perfect. So you're probably wondering, where does oxygen come from? Where does the glucose come from? So as you know, we breathe in and out. The oxygen comes, it attaches to the red blood cells. The red blood cells go around the body and they release the oxygen basically, okay? And so the supply for this reaction basically comes from the red blood cells and the blood flow. And then what you've got is your glucose. And so your glucose is actually found inside most of your cells. Can you guess which cell might have a lot of glucose? So your skeletal muscle cells will have a lot more glucose because they're normally used a lot more. They're very, very active. Think about it, you're moving all day, so your skeletal muscles are going to be used quite a lot. And then this results in the production of CO2 and H2O. It's very important that we know this. So we need to know there is a certain organelle inside the body, and it's called the mitochondria, okay? And this is basically the mitochondria. It's this one over here. And it's got a very crucial role in respiration, okay? So this is basically the energy producing factory inside the cells. This is where you get all the breakdown of the glucose molecules, and then you get the production of energy. And it's very important to know that energy, it might not be important for GCSEs, but it's important to know for A levels is that energy, it comes in the form of ATP, okay? So we'll go into this next time, or we can go through it today if you want me to. But it's basically like a little molecule. It's got 3 phosphate molecules, and it's got an adenosine attached to it as well. It's basically, you know how we use pounds in the UK to get stuff? The body's currency is ATP, basically. So ATP is a one to remember, okay? And so don't forget that aerobic respiration occurs in the cytoplasm. Perfect. So can you quickly summarize aerobic respiration? Okay. Now, in biology and chemistry, it's always good to compare things with each other. So we've got aerobic respiration on one side, and on the other side, we've got anaerobic respiration, okay? Now, this is incredibly important because it's basically used in certain times. So we might use it, for example, in your flight and fight response, where the body's scared, you want to run quickly away, you want to have that rapid burst of energy. So you've got your anaerobic respiration, okay? It occurs differently in human bodies and also in plant cells, and we'll go through that difference too as well, okay? So in human bodies, your glucose is broken down rapidly, so you get a very, very fast amount of energy. But then you're probably thinking, why don't we have this all the time? The reason being is because the byproduct of breaking glucose rapidly is lactic acid. And lactic acid, do you know what it does? Exactly. So you know when you use your hands for too long, or you running around and your muscles begin to cramp, that's basically the accumulation of your lactic acid inside your body. It causes tiredness, cramping, and so your body has to rest for it to go back to normal, okay? And that's the byproduct, lactic acid. You get energy, but in fact, it's also important to know that the amount of energy that you get from anaerobic respiration is actually a lot less compared to aerobic. So keep this in mind. So you get less energy. So we've got a down arrow showing that we get less energy, whereas with aerobic, where we have oxygen, where then you basically get, so when you get oxygen, yeah, you're going to have much more energy, okay? Much more energy in aerobic respiration, good. And so you get the incomplete breakdown of glucose, you get less energy, you get lactic acid, but you get that rapid burst of energy, which you might need for only like 5 or 10 minutes, or maybe even 1 minute, or maybe even 30 seconds in your flight and fight responses. So don't forget your flight and fight responses. Don't forget, we'll go through the whole neuronal aspects, so for example, like your sympathetic nervous system, how that's kicked in. You know, you'll start breathing fast, your heart rate starts beating fast. So we'll go through all that as well, okay? Perfect. So now, as we said before, it's good to compare things. Now let's compare anaerobic respiration in human bodies with anaerobic respiration in plant and yeast cells. So just to summarize, aerobic respiration uses oxygen. Anaerobic respiration does not use oxygen, okay? So those are the two main differences. Now, in plant cells and human cells, in terms of anaerobic respiration, so do you remember that we said in humans you get lactic acid? Well, in plant and yeast cells, we get something totally different. We get ethanol. And do you know what ethanol is used to make? Exactly. So it's used to make alcohol, basically. And so, as you can imagine, if you can get yeast cells and plant cells to create alcohol, you can create an industry. And so the common use of yeast cells is for making beer, and it's still used to this day. It's the most widely used method to produce beer, in fact. So it's used in the industry. What else is yeast used for? What do you think? Exactly, so it's used for bread as well. And that's because of the CO2 released by the anaerobic respiration. You get carbon dioxide, and this basically helps the bread to rise. So quick recap, let's quickly compare anaerobic to humans and animals. and plants, and then let's compare aerobic and anaerobic. I'll let you talk about it now.